The only true happiness lies in knowing who you are and making peace with it. Laurel K. Hamilton. Hi, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Misadventures of the Mind podcast. The podcast where we talk about everything emotions, mental, life, the mysteries of life, and everything in between. You can listen to this podcast every other Friday on Spotify or on YouTube. There's also an Instagram page you can follow. You can like the post. You can send your personal direct messages. You can also find this podcast on TikTok, where you get behind the scenes short clips, the making of episodes, if you're ever interested in that. But anyway, without rambling too much, hi, welcome back. You know me, you know my voice. It is I, your clinical child and adolescent psychologist, alias Kaleg Nadal, and today is the very first episode of the new year. Welcome to 2024. And I'm really excited because today I have a very interesting topic to talk about. It has a little bit to do with the topic of last week, which was the bonus episode. So if you haven't listened to it yet, stop this podcast right now and go back in the list of episodes on Spotify or on YouTube, wherever you might listen to this podcast, and check it out, and then you can circle back to this episode. But without further ado, today's episode is one that I think might bring up certain feelings, maybe certain questions. It could bring up both, who knows, because it is a topic that maybe you've had questions about, either in the past, in the present, or for the future. But without further ado, today's misadventure of the mind is one that convinces you that you should change for the benefit of someone else. Like I said, today's episode is one that is pretty special, not just because of the topic, but today is the first episode that I have a special guest. The special guest that I have for today is my husband.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Misadventure of the Mind podcast.
So, David, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
How does it feel?
Nerve-wracking.
That's great. That's great. This is the perfect place to be then, because, we talk about a whole lot of stuff, and I feel like nerve-wracking falls under that umbrella. So this is a great moment for you, but also a great moment for the pod.
I'm excited.
Thanks for blessing us and gracing us with your presence. So yeah, that was Husband Dearest. But before we, continue with the meat and the essence of the topic of the podcast, you know how we like to do it here. We like to link up with the friend of the pod, Merriam-Webster Dictionary. This episode's word of the day is, what is identity? And what does it mean to have an identity? It can be a very broad, a very vague word when you say, oh, what's your identity? Or my identity is such and such, or I identify as such and such. But what does it actually mean? And if you do a simple Google search or use the Merriam-Webster dictionary or the Oxford dictionary or any other dictionary that you might or might not have laying around in your house, the term identity is defined as the distinguishing character or personality of an individual. And then it also has individuality. And that's a very hefty word, because if you also look up the term individuality, if you split it up, individual meaning one, it means that everyone has their own value. And according to Merriam-Webster, individuality means a total character peculiar to or distinguishing an individual from others, i.e. personality, Or a second definition is also separate or distinct existence. Tough, very much in your face, but also very straightforward. And that's actually why I like this definition, because it really brings to light what is the essence of actually what I'm trying to say, is the fact that everyone is their own individual. So you are distinct, you are separate and distinguishable from other people. So, to refer back to the misadventure of the mind, one that convinces you that you should change to benefit others, that feeling, that misadventure of your mind is one not of your own, but influenced by the societal norms. One that says that you should do this and this to fit in. Being an individual, being someone with their own thoughts, with their own opinions, is actually wrong and might lead to being an outcast or might lead to being ostracized. But we'll get back into that in a minute. And another word that I actually thought about when I was thinking about identity and the topic of today is authenticity and what it means to be authentic. Today's episode, as you can see, is titled The Authentic Self. But what does that actually mean to be authentic and to have authenticity? And again, referring back to our good friend of the pod, authentic, according to Merriam-Webster, is defined as not false or imitation, real, something that is genuine or even factual, dare I say. And there's also a second definition that defines authenticity as true to one's own personality, spirit, or character. There again, the word personality comes up. But what is personality? What does it mean to have a personality? Do you know your own personality? And if you do, how would you describe it? I'm curious. Question for yourself. So yeah, with all that being said, with having understood the term identity, what it means to have authenticity and a personality, do you even know your personality? But then there's a question that came up in my mind is, why is it important? But to answer that question, I feel like having my guests answer, because obviously you guys love hearing my voice, but hearing a perspective from someone else I think is also beneficial for the growth and development of understanding, but also your own perspective. So, David,
Yes.
how would you describe? First of all, let's start with identity. How would you describe, or what does it mean to you to have identity or to be authentic?
Well, based on the definition that you read on the Merriam-Webster dictionary, what it means to me is not exactly what it says in the dictionary, because although identity is based off of one's individuality, I believe that their surroundings also determine their identity.
Oh, okay. Their surroundings. Tell me more.
I believe that the fact, I am a person who was born in the Caribbean, Aruba.
Shout out to the Caribbean Islands.
Well, and I believe if I were to be born someplace else, let's say I was born in Japan,
Okay.
then I feel like I would not even be close to who I am right now. And that's because of the surroundings that I was born in. Because they have a whole different culture and a whole different way of thinking. Even if I was still born in the Caribbean, but in a different family, I would still have different traditions. I was born in a Christian household. So if I was born in a non-Christian household, my whole identity would be different as well.
Okay, so you feel like if I understand you correctly, you feel like identity is not just based on personality in terms of what you like and what you do, but also your environmental circumstances.
Yes.
Okay, that's a very interesting way to see it. I wonder, do you also feel like you can have the same interest or personality had you been born somewhere else?
Well, I feel like that question is all but impossible to answer.
Fair.
However, if I were to dig deep and look into my spiritual self, I believe that once a David, always a David.
Period. Once a David, always a David. I wonder, listener, my fellow loyal listeners, do you also feel the same way? Do you feel like were you crafted and created based not solely on what you like and what you do, but also where you were born? But now, David, what about the authentic self? Do you feel like you're authentic? And also, disclaimer, for new listeners, but also regular listeners, here and there we kind of get deep with our topics, we kind of get a little bit vulnerable. So, mind your edges, they may get snatched. But
Chee!
David, do you feel like you're your authentic self?
Well, I believe I can turn it on and off depending on my company. For instance, I'm with you. There's no reason for me not to be my authentic self. However, if I'm in the workplace, an environment where there's people to quote unquote impress, for instance, you need to almost exaggerate your best features. I feel like sometimes I can fall into the trap of not being my authentic self and trying to force my way into being, how you say,
Socially acceptable.
correct.
Dare I say you fall into your own misadventures trap.
Ooh, I like that.
Okay, that's really interesting. And I think that you're not the only one. I feel like most of us, if not all, have or do fall into that trap of not being or not feeling comfortable enough to be our authentic self based on maybe, for example, a workplace, or you feel like or fear actually of being judged. Do you also feel that way, that if you show your authentic self, that people will judge you in a negative way?
I do feel that way. Many times where it's like my authentic self could be a little bit much for the normal crowd. And I don't know who's normal and who's not normal. So it's best to play it safe.
Indeed, that's it could be a trauma response or a survival response. Who
Definitely
knows?
trauma.
But that's a conversation for another day. But that's also a very interesting and honest. Thank you for your honesty. I'm sure someone out there also relates. I know I do, because there's also a thing where I guess it's a thing that I do regularly where it's I code switch. And if you're not familiar with that term, it basically means that you just change the way how you act or speak to a certain group of people depending on the group of people. So, for example, if I'm with my friends, all of them from the Caribbean islands, I speak very differently than if I'm at work. We would have a different cadence, we would have a different tone, we would even have different terms that we'd use just because we feel more comfortable. But also, I think, or for me personally, I feel like I shouldn't have to explain myself. And I think if I were to speak how I normally speak to the people who I mostly associate myself with outside of home or with my close friends, I feel like I would have to do a lot of explanation. And to be honest, I think that I shouldn't have to do that. And I'm okay with that. I don't know if you're the same, but what do you think?
Well, there is a question that rises up. Could it be considered like a different type of language, for instance?
What do you
Because
mean?
if you were to speak to somebody who only understands Spanish, you wouldn't speak comfortably, but you would speak in their language. And now, the same way with code switching, if you were to speak your normal way of speaking, like for instance, like this, we speak in like Caribbean people to speak. Now, people who are not from the Caribbean may have a hard time understanding, and that's why we code switch to make sure that it's
They
comfortable
understand.
for whoever might be listening.
Okay. I could see that, but also then there's the question of why should we make them feel comfortable? Why can't we just be a little selfish and focus on ourselves?
Well, that is because we have grown up learning three different languages.
Yeah.
So we are very well versed in the way of speaking. So it's very easy for us to go there. I don't think it's easy for them to come where we
Oh,
are.
fair. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Okay.
that goes for any other type of people. I'm saying Caribbean people are like the best
The unicorns of the world.
best language speakers in the world, but that's just my take on it.
Also, best linguists, but you know.
Okay.
Okay, that's a fair point. So, yeah, there's a question that actually comes up with all of this code switching talk and identity and being authentic is, does it even matter to have an identity? Is it important for you to be your authentic self? And I'm gonna pass the torch over to my guest for him to share his thoughts on that question.
Okay, why does it matter?
Or is it important?
We can get really, really deep
Okay, let's do it.
and say that technically nothing really matters.
Okay.
Nothing you do matters. We're all gonna die.
Okay.
Why does being your authentic self matter? It matters because if you can be honest with yourself, then being honest with other people will also be quite difficult. And who likes a liar?
Ooh, that's a word. If you can't be honest with yourself, how can you be honest with other people? Say more, elaborate.
Okay.
So, okay, question. So, what benefit does it have to be honest with yourself first?
Ooh.
And I'm psychologist saying my husband.
Yeah.
You should be used to it by now. Shame.
Benefits?
Yeah.
Aside from feeling good, I don't think there is any benefits really.
That could be the only benefit as well, that you feel good, that you feel good about yourself. I think, if I may add my answer, I think that if you're your authentic self, it makes going into the world and dealing with societal norms a lot more bearable, because you don't have to think about what another person is going to think about you, or what they'll say about what you like, or what you wear, how you act. You'll just be you for being you's sake, because like you said, it makes you happy. It brings you joy. And I think that joy is something that a lot of us take for granted when we're growing up. Coincidentally, a couple of maybe weeks or days ago, remember we were seeing these kids and they were just kind of playing very like childlike and not really caring what's happening around them. And they just had a pure and genuine joy in their face, in their behavior. And I think as we grow up, as we get older, as we realize the pressures of society, we lose that joy with each year that passes, I think. You gain that, yeah, kind of dark cloud that follows you everywhere and tells you maybe that you're not good enough or you should change to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes sense because, in psychology, there's this theory. It's called the self-determination theory by Desi and Ryan. And Desi with a C, not an S, DECI, and Ryan. That's two different scientists. And they theorized that in life, in order for you to feel satisfaction in life, you need three main components. That's autonomy, your will to do things on your own, your ability and your own will, following that own will. Relatedness, and that is the thing that I want to stay by, which is, trying to find yourself in a group, and therefore maybe you fall in the trap of wanting to change yourself to fall in this group. And the third one is competence, is your skill, the rate and extent of your abilities, basically. But the relatedness is the thing that I think is most important, especially when we're talking about identity, because without a identity or without feeling like you fit in, you might also feel like you should change to fit in. You might want to change your identity to fit in a box that society tells you you should fit into.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Well, the first thing that came up in my mind is will to fit into society is also, it feels like a survival type of thing. Almost, because it's like, let's say you're in a Hunger Games type of situation and you're alone. You're gonna die.
Fair, unless you're really good at surviving.
If you're really good at surviving and you come up against a group of people trying to kill you, you're probably gonna die.
That's fair.
However, if you have the skills to be a quote unquote chameleon and fit in with their crowd and say, hey man, I can help you out. I can be your friend. You might survive a little longer.
That's a good point. And if you're not familiar with the Hunger Games, you should watch it. I mean, if you're into the post-apocalyptic type of like teen movies, it's a 3-part book series, 4-part movie series, and the person he's talking about specifically is Peta.
And I mean, if we're talking to the younger crowd, just think of it like Fortnite. And
Okay.
if you're playing by yourself against a squad, you will probably die. But if you were to somehow be able to make friends with the other team, you might survive longer.
For the gamers out there, honestly, I didn't even think about you guys. I'm so sorry. I know you're listening. But yeah, think about it as Fortnite or any battle royale type game where you kind of need your squad to survive. We can attest to that. We have first-hand trauma on not surviving because our squad is dead. But again, conversation for another day. But yes, going back to the question that we had, does it matter and why does it matter? Do you have anything else to add on why having an identity and being authentic should matter?
I believe that this question is very difficult to answer. Because if you are, say, by yourself, are you just always your authentic self?
Because I think that, I guess it refers to what you said, if when you're at home by yourself without the influence and maybe pressure of other people around, which version of yourself that you portray to those different groups are you? And I think without an identity, without being your authentic self, you can get lost in the crowd and not know where you need to go, but also where you want to go.
But surely at home you just be yourself.
Yeah, but what does yourself mean if you don't know what that is? If you don't have any steadfast or any grounds of your identity. You don't have a foundation.
It's just whatever feels most comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it would be something to actually have to search within yourself. It's more like I'm at home now, and then you just take off all your clothes.
Yeah.
It's almost like that. So like, you take off all the excess personalities that you put on for everybody else, and then that's you.
But then it does matter then
How
who
so?
you are.
Because the question would be, does it matter to be your authentic self all the time?
Yeah.
Then no,
Why?
because being a quote unquote chameleon will gain you benefits such as connections and comfort.
Comfort, but you
Yeah.
can also be comfort by being yourself. Because I think if you're trying to fit into every single group, then I think subconsciously and also without you knowing, you're losing a part of yourself.
Ooh.
I feel like you won't even know after doing it for maybe a long time or with many groups. I think that you won't even know who your authentic self is. So even if you, like you said, take off all of your clothes, you'd still be left with certain bits and pieces of the personality or the mask that you put on while you were in the group outside of your comfort.
I don't know. I feel like it's more simple than that. I feel like the mask that you put on is, like you say, it's not you, and I feel like you know it's not you in the sense where it is a bit uncomfortable to code switch.
Mm.
So then you know that's not you. You don't feel comfortable, so that's not something that you, how you say, you save it.
What do you mean?
Like you use it. Like if you open a new file of Word,
Mm.
you type a story
Mm.
for the time being, and then when you're done with it, discard it. Do not change, save it, and it's gone. You're back to your blank page.
Okay. So you think that. Wait, I don't think I fully understand.
What I am saying is, if you code switch, you change your personality to fit in with a crowd, at that point, you're uncomfortable. You're not being
Mm.
your authentic self and you can feel it. And as soon as you have to stop doing that, you feel relieved.
Mm.
And that's your authentic self right there. I don't feel like you can keep parts of it because it's uncomfortable. It's
Mm.
unnatural. It's not
Mm.
supposed to be there, so it doesn't save.
Okay. Okay, I understand now. But then my question is, and I actually have two, it's a two-part question or two separate questions. The first one is because you said maybe it's a lot simpler than I see it. So maybe for another person, they don't see it in a complex way where they don't really know who they are, so they lose a part of themselves. But what if you're a person who never really got to figure out who they are
Hmm.
as a person, or they don't know their identity or personality?
Right.
They've literally went through their entire life just being a chameleon. Then
Mm,
at that point, you don't really know who you are.
that's true. Well, it does work differently for different people, I guess.
Indeed. And then the second question is, if this person in your story, in your example, does find it difficult or uncomfortable to have to code switch the whole time, and what I understand is it's pretty tiring, then my question is, why would they need to do it? And this is also a question for the listener. If you're a type of person who benefits from finding comfort with other people in different groups, or chooses to code switch or, blend into different groups, are you tired? Do you feel comfortable? And if you are tired and uncomfortable, why do you do it? Why would you have to do it?
Have to do it is a strong word, I
Okay.
think. I believe it's almost like a habit, where it's like, if I were to be my authentic self, there's a chance they may not like it. But if I were to switch to their code and make them feel comfortable, there's no way they won't like it. So it's almost a sure thing instead of a risk. If you do your authentic self, it's completely fine. It usually works out.
Yeah.
But in the mind, in this misadventure, your brain says you're not good enough. You need to change.
You should change.
And that's where it comes from. That's what I believe.
I agree. I think that it is, like we said previously, and it is a conversation for a different day, but also we're preluding it today in this episode. I think it is a trauma response. I think based on maybe conscious and subconscious past experiences, and specifically negative past experiences, with us trying to be our authentic self, we didn't get the response that we hoped for or wanted. And based on that, we subconsciously decided to change, to just act a little bit differently, to be more like the group, be more like the crowd, have the same type of speaking style, or have the same thinking pattern, have the same interests, so that we can fit in, like you said, comfortably in that group, so we don't have the, let's say, conflict of being rejected. Are your edges snatched yet?
Those people aren't that important. You don't need to impress them.
Truthfully, that's a word, because if you're so fixated and almost obsessed with having people like you, who frankly I think at the end of the day don't even care about you, you're dragging yourself down and wearing yourself out for people who don't actually matter. And the question that you should ask yourself is it worth it? Is it worth you being so tired and so uncomfortable for these people? For you to lose yourself, for you to not be fully you, to not be your full authentic self? Question for yourself. Ask yourself the tough questions. All right, so we talked about identity, authentic self, if it matters, and if it does matter, why? But then my question for you is, and this is more so a self-reflective type of question, but also prompt, who do you want to be in the next couple of years? Because I personally believe that your identity changes over the course of time, not specifically because of external circumstances like social norms or your friends or you wanting to fit in, but more so because you grow into who you are. So I think that with the course of time, you learn who you are, but also who you want to be. So my question is, have you thought about that yet? Have you thought about the person who you are portraying currently in this present day and age, comparing it to the person that you actually want to be? Do you have a desired identity or version of yourself that you would like to see more of in the upcoming years, especially now that it's the new year? Do you have a new year, new me?
Ooh, the forbidden phrase.
No, you guys already know how I feel about this, but do you have a thing that you may already have been working on and you wish to continue working on it in the upcoming years?
In terms of identity?
In terms of identity, maybe personality, interests, a goal.
Now that I think about it,
Yeah.
I believe that I am great.
Per. I concur. I agree wholeheartedly.
However, I believe that me doing things, it takes time.
It
It,
takes
it takes
time.
time for me to get on doing things. I like to take things and put it on the back burner.
A procrastinator.
Some may call it procrastination. I call it selective work.
Oh, I wonder, are one of you also selective workers? Maybe something to think about in the upcoming years. But is it good or bad?
Procrastination?
You're selective working.
I'd say no.
Okay.
It is not good nor bad, actually.
Neutral.
It's neutral.
However,
Actually, procrastinating to this degree is bad.
okay.
So if you have something that you need to do and you decide, when's the deadline? Next week? I'll start on day 6. That's bad.
Fair.
A healthy amount of procrastination, that's fine, because you don't want to stress yourself out if you have 3 different things that you have to do. You don't want to do all of it at the same time. That's why you need a plan.
Be a planner like myself.
Exactly.
Marry a planner, guys. It'll benefit your life.
I agree. But yeah, so...
But do you feel like procrastination is a part of your identity?
Yes.
Okay.
100% a part of my identity. I'd like to change that. And, changing it is not going to happen overnight.
No, for sure.
You've heard this before. It's a long process to change it. So it's not something to say, new year, new me. It's more like over the course of the next 10 years.
Which is okay, because everything is a process. It's a journey. It definitely has ups and downs.
Yes.
But you said that you'd like to change it. What inspired you or motivated you to want to change that aspect of your identity?
Well, just the amount of time that I've wasted.
Okay.
Just more and more there's some days that you wake up and then you go to sleep. And it's like, okay, I spent literally 24 hours doing nothing. And it's like, wow, why am I here? What am I doing? You start to lose your purpose.
Wow, that was deep. I did not expect. Okay, wow. You start to lose your purpose.
Because you start to think, okay, I am here. I'm living on planet Earth. But why? I just spent a whole day doing nothing.
Right.
And nothing has changed.
So you feel like if you were doing something that you would be operating in your purpose.
Yes, I would gain some sort of knowledge. I would be working towards a goal. Something would make a difference.
Okay. Wow, that's I like that. I love that for you. As for me, my desired identity or something that I identify as or with that I'd like to strengthen, I think, not improve, but more so strengthen, is going for the things that I have in my head. So my ambitions. I feel like I have a lot of ambitions because I am a purpose-driven type of person. However, I sometimes let internal as well as external factors determine whether or not I should take the course or even start. I want to be the person who is known as the go-getter.
Ooh.
Maybe I'm already that person, but I want to be more so.
Okay, say more, say more.
Um, I mean, yeah. I think for the most part of maybe growing up, I don't know. Maybe it's also later in adulthood where I felt like, oh, self-doubt, or maybe I shouldn't do that because somebody else does it better. Like starting a podcast, I thought, okay, but everyone has a podcast. There are literally millions of, maybe not millions, but maybe thousands of podcasts out there. Why would I also just start one?
What ultimately gave you the go ahead to do it?
Okay, first of all, I don't like that you're psychologizing me. I feel like, but also props to me because clearly I do a good job.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But what prompted me to do it anyway? I don't know, if I'm being honest. I think it's just because I wanted to do it for so long that I said, what better time than the present?
Mm-hmm.
And then I took out episode 1. No, I took out the trailer first, and it didn't really get a lot of views or listens. So then I took out episode 1, which was more so of the same, and now we're at episode 5. And I think even though the listen count is not like huge, I think that currently, but also in the course of time, the right person is gonna find it. Or rather, I think this podcast is going to find the people who need it. I think that is I'd say the reason and incentive behind creating this podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's more so about the goal of the podcast that made you ultimately start it.
Kind of.
Okay.
A little bit. Because I am passionate about sharing knowledge and just, talking. But also, yeah, the goal of the podcast is to, inform people and also let people know that it's okay for them to think or feel this type of way.
Right.
They're not alone.
Does it make sense then to say, for your other ambitions, wouldn't it be beneficial to maybe look at the goals of these and see if it's actually worth doing?
Perhaps, but I think worth doing is kind of the thing that holds me back, because I think if I were to think about it that way, I think that I wouldn't choose to do it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if I take, let's say, something else like my art, for example, if I think about the goal, my goal is to create art, or actually specifically my merch, Pretty Boys Club. If I were to think about whether or not it's worth it, I'd say no. But it's not if it's worth it. It's more so of if I want to do it. And if the answer is yes, I want to do it, then I think that should be reason enough.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I'm an interesting person. And I hope that you also found it interesting, to be honest, or at least insightful, interesting, a different way of thinking. If you enjoyed it, please let us know. Comment in you can comment under the podcast episode on Spotify. You can also find the podcast on YouTube, posted on the YouTube channel at Misadventures of the Mind. You can also send a direct message to the Instagram page at Misadventures of the Mind. And you know how we like to end each episode, and that is with a cute, small, short affirmation. So this is your biblical affirmation for my Bible readers out there, found in Psalms 139, verse 14. And I'd like to ask my guest, David Nadal, to read it for us.
For those of you reading along with me, it's in the NIV version. If you like to understand what you're reading instead of the old English. If you understand that too, it's fine. But this is the NIV version. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, I know that full well.
Beautiful. And the affirmation I have for you today for your Friday, for your weekend, or for your start of the week is I choose authenticity over perfection. And if you made it this far, I want to thank you, my fellow and loyal listeners. Thank you for listening to the first episode of the new year. Again, we made it to 2024. I also want to thank my special guest, David Nadal, my husband. He was great. First time doing a podcast ever. So, claps up for David Nadal. And if you're interested in also being a guest on the podcast, just hit me up. Not me personally, because I will not answer. But you can definitely send a direct message to the Instagram page at Misadventures of the Mind. And with that, I want to thank you once again. And I hope to inform you on another episode. Okay, thanks. Bye. You gonna say bye?
Say bye.
Say bye.
Bye.